Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Ramatu Mohammed with Center for Leadership and Disability. Welcome to the 2019 Parent Webinar Series, Ask the Parents. Before I start, I would like to introduce myself. I'm the Family Support Specialist with Center for Leadership and Disability, and I'm also a parent of 4 children. My oldest daughter is living with cerebral palsy, autism spectrum disorders, and other diagnoses, including seizure disorder. Today's webinar is titled Ask the Parents, and before we start the webinar, just a few things to note is that everyone will be muted except the presenters, and during the presentation you can feel free to drop down your questions, and we would get to the questions at the end of the presentation. A little brief about our presenters today. We have Nadege and Beth. Both of them are parents of students who recently graduated from the Inclusive Postsecondary Education program. Nadege, a little bit about her is that she is the mother of Mendel, who is one of the first 2 graduates at the IDIL program. She's a certified court interpreter and translator and completed an MA in Interpreting and Translation Studies. She's passionate about translating culture, people in honor of both source and target languages. And having a son on the autism spectrum, she became adamant about herbs, healthy eating, and lifestyles to help heal and the disconnect between the gut and the brain. Beth Vogel is a pediatric nurse practitioner. She's the parent of Kurt. He's currently a staff with Center for Leadership and Disability. The other things about Beth is that she's a training adult hospice professional for caring for children. She has dual master's degree in nursing and public health, and she's the mother of 2 grown sons, and her son, Kurt, graduated from the Excel program. So let me unmute Beth and Nadege. Nadege, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Nadege Cherubin, and as you already introduced, I am a court interpreter. I work in the federal and state courts here in Georgia and some other states as needed. I have, do I start the presentation already?
No, we're just saying introductions now. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Beth now.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Beth.
Thank you for that introduction, Ramatu. Yes, Charlie and I are parents of Kurt, and we have another son, and Kurt has an older brother, Andrew, and as Ramatu said, he just finished in the spring the program from Georgia Tech.
Thank you, Beth. So we'll go ahead and start the presentation. Let me share. Nadege is going to be the first person starting. She's going to talk for about 15 minutes. And after Nadege's presentation, then we would go ahead and start. We'll go ahead and do Beth's presentation. Okay. Nadege, you could start.
Okay. Hi, as I said before, my name is Nadege Cherubin, and my son's name is Mendel Mendels, but I think he likes to just be called Mendel Mendels. Are you clicking away from me? Because I don't, for some reason, since I have my screen.
Okay, yes, I am going to help you click it when you're, yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna start it.
Okay, so Mendel is 25 years old, and one thing we noticed with Mendel, when we read about being on the autism spectrum, Mendel seems to be quite social for someone who's in the autism spectrum. He loves to do things. He loves to meet people. He loves to be with people. He loves to make jokes when he's comfortable. Once he's past the initial phase of being uncomfortable or transitioning into a new space. They've diagnosed Mendel with language and cognitive delay. He recently graduated from the Georgia State University, the IDEA program, and in career readiness, digital media and art design. He loves books. He loves to add numbers to infinity. He'll get to very, very large numbers that he'll add the number repeatedly. And he loves TV, computer, anything that's screen related, video games, cartoons. And currently he's trying to land a job. In fact, today he has an interview at a place that he loves. He expressed that he would want to work there for many years, which is Barnes and Noble. So he has an interview, so make a prayer for Mendel. For his pastime, he studies French currently. He's taking guitar lessons and painting lessons. And the very early years of Mendel was born, and it wasn't until very later in elementary school that we learned of something called the autism spectrum. Mendel started, we were living in Chicago at the time. Mendel went to a very, very good school they have at the Chicago University at the University of Chicago. It's called the Lab School. And I think there they started noticing certain things that Mendel had a very, I guess, a special way, a very unusual way of learning. And, but we didn't have a diagnostic yet. And while in Chicago, I ended up relocating back to my home country, which is Haiti, because I never heard of epilepsy, and Mendel was diagnosed as having that. He had a few febrile seizures. And then we had done EEG that showed that he was having lots of activities on his left brain. Since at the time I was studying, I was in school and with Mendel, and I had to often drop Mendel very early, 7 in the morning, and picking him up after class, my evening classes. It was a lot of stress for him. So once I learned that there was an issue medically, I decided to relocate back to my country with him, where I would have support, family support. So from 5 years old until 12 years old, Mendel lived in Montessori, in Haiti, and went to a Montessori school setting. And again, there we would hear things that he's very, like they would say, kind of like unusual. And at one point, we also did some homeschooling with Mendel and noticed that he had a very unique way of learning. Like he's an early bird. He would wake up very early at dawn, and then by 10 a.m., all school activities would have to end because you couldn't get him to stay attentive after 10 a.m. So we did that for 7 years in Haiti. Then we relocated again back in the state. And this is where he entered the education, the elementary school system in the US. And that's where they diagnosed him as being on the autism spectrum. So we stayed here in the US until Mendel graduated from Warren Tech High School, Warren Technical High School, where he did a focus for 2 years in graphic communications. Again, the program was just 2 years. And one thing we always notice with Mendel, it takes him a bit of time to get acclimated in an environment. And often the programs we've been finding, they have that 2-year mark. And once Mendel's getting acclimated, so he has to change again, transition. So after Warren Technical School, graphic communication, he completed with a special ed diploma. And we tried different things in terms of, I tried the Georgia Vocational Rehab School program, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking out. I don't remember the name of the school, but the Georgia Voc Rehab, they have an educational program. and we had to go through a whole process. And for some reason, he wasn't accepted because the psychologist who saw him thought he probably would not be able to handle the setting or being away from home and the setting. And the psychologist thought he was a bit under depression. So the Georgia Vocational Rehab Educational Program didn't work out. So we continued trying to the normal school. We tried the Georgia State University. They had him take what do you call this, placement test. And since Mendel has a habit of not reading what's being asked, he didn't fare well in that. We tried Piedmont College, and we learned about the Georgia Tech post-secondary inclusive program. Mendel there went through the whole rigorous process, and he wasn't accepted. So I kept trying different things until we were reached by the Georgia State University, the IDEAL program, and Mendel was enrolled there. Started a program that we're hoping would be a 4-year. It was a pilot program, hoping to turn into a 4-year, but he ended up doing 2 years, and he graduated last year. I don't know if you can move to the next slide for me. Thank you. I think I've already gone through that. Thank you. So once Mendel got accepted at the IDEAL program, the first year, Mendel was excited, so was the whole family. And Mendel learned to transition into different things very quickly and was gained a lot of independence. He finally graduated with a 2-year certificate program. We're hoping again to have the option for him to continue. Like I said in the beginning, after 2 years, it seems like Mendel is just getting acclimated and to start on to get focused. And unfortunately, generally the programs are just 2 years, and then he has to switch into something else. So the first year he learned to navigate transportation. At the beginning, I had to drive him around until the school, the Georgia State University IDEAL program, helped connect Mendel with MARTA bus services, and they trained him into learning how to ride the bus and the train. And he's been doing that. Now he goes anywhere and everywhere he wants to. And currently he's taking French classes at the Alliance Française, which is in Midtown. And he learned to do that by himself, and he's taking the train and learn a new route again, and to get to classes. And the same thing, he's taking music, piano, guitar lessons. I was pushing piano, but he ended up choosing something else, which is a guitar. And he also has learned how to navigate the transportation by himself from learning it at the Georgia State IDEAL program. And Mendel lived with the family, but he's independent in his own space. During the first year also, he learned to make his own lunch and also take care of his own debit card for whenever he needed. Next slide, please. Financing college was a bit of a challenge because the pilot program at Georgia State University had to go through a certification process. And so therefore we had to wait until Georgia Vocational Rehab could cover Mendel's tuition or financial aid could cover it. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't aware of that situation. So therefore I think the first 2 or 3 semesters I had to cover out-of-pocket tuition or anything else that Mendel was in need of. And while the Georgia IDEAL program completed their certification process. As soon as they had that, then financial aid kick in, and which was a great relief. And also the thing that helped mitigate the whole financial situation as well was the IDEAL program started offering scholarships. So Mendel was able to cover the tuition through, at the beginning, the out-of-pocket tuition, then the Georgia IDEAL program scholarship, and finally we ended with financial aid. Um, the last year of graduation, some final thoughts would be, I think I mentioned that earlier, is our wish would have been that Mendel had the option of furthering his college experience and starting to study something, you know, after all his trials, the different things that he was exposed to, finding something that he was more able and kind of push him to encourage him to focus on that. And I think at one point, what they had noticed at the school was probably the French language. Since he was exposed to French, he did study in both school system for 7 years of his life. And although he kind of like when he returned, he had stopped using French, but I think French would have been something very easy for him, and beyond a 2-year college could have probably do something much more specific. Um, the So that would be my biggest thing in terms of the final year. To me, there should be a focus. After you try many different things, you expose the student, the child, to different, or the young adult rather, to different things. At one point, you have to zero in on what they are more able, where they have the most interest, and kind of like build on that so that they come out with some sort of a mastery on one or two things. And the other thing, in the final year, I wish I understood better and had gotten him more support, is once he finished, since he's completed with a career readiness certificate, that he was going to transfer into the job market. But it seems like there was like a cutoff period, and transitioning into with GVRA, and it seems like he's starting over, and hopefully and it's almost like he's in the mainstream. I figured that since it's supported employment, there would be connecting with specific companies who are already aware that this child will be having supported employment. But instead, it's almost like with the general population, they're putting up their resume to different companies and hopefully to land, hoping to land a job. So those would be my two things. And at the final year of graduation, I kind of like was pushing, okay, can he stay more and get the more college experience? But since it ended, now it was, where do we go? But we managed to create, customize a program for him, and hopefully he can land the job that he seems to want to work, and also continue with different classes and different places. Before I enrolled Mendel, what I would have hoped is understand that there's certain programs go through a certification process, and parents probably need to expect to be paying out of pocket. And also the possibility, again, that's one of my biggest things, the possibility for the students who can to have the option of going beyond 2 years. Because I think these are special students. It takes them time to get acclimated. And from what I understand from seeing Mendel, although he at times was overwhelmed, but I think the college and what he has learned during the 2 years, continuing into something more focused, would have been beneficial for him. And what I wish I knew too before, it's how the job process or the job placement work, since we seem to work in parallel with Georgia Vocational Rehab, instead of going back to an initial phase, that it's more like something that's continuing. And what I would have done differently, advice to parents considering college, again, it's to advocate for a certificate on a specific skill set. I feel like career readiness needs to be more precise. Readiness into doing what? Again, a mastery of one or two skill set would have been very helpful. The other thing is I would recommend to parents to push to whichever program they're participating in, to identify the interest and the child's strength in a particular subject, and to kind of like to immerse the child in that particular subject that they have strength. Yeah. And the other advice as well is, if the child is interested in working afterwards, and that transition is done seamlessly. It's not something there's a cutoff time, because I feel like right now Mendels is taking a gap semester, or probably a gap year. So it's something, if the child is interested in landing a job, they should, the transition should be made without any issues. The other advice also is, if the school can offer a 2-year, that it's a firm understanding that the child would have the 2-year, get acclimated, and then can go beyond to gaining mastery on a particular subject or skill. And also, I always say that these special students, or these special young adults, although they trying to have a college experience like the general population, but they're not the general population, and they need to have the whole college experience customized based on their strengths, their abilities, and all that. But to me, I would, if I had to do this again, I would do it again, because Mendel gained more than he didn't. I mean, regardless of the little imperfections, he had gotten a lot. So I'm quite thankful. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much for your very thorough presentation. Now it's time for us to invite Beth to start hers. Let me share her webinar, her own presentation. I'm coming on. Okay. I'm just a moment while I pull up Beth's. Okay. I'm trying to pull up yours, Beth, and I keep seeing the dashes. I'm coming. Let me close. Let me close the dash. Okay, yes. Thank you. Okay. 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 Here we go, Beth.
Okay. Thank you, Ramatu. Thank you for inviting Nadege and I to present. As I was listening to her presentation, I was aware that there are so many similarities. Some of the things that I will say she has said, I think that affirms our experiences as parents. We say of children with particular special needs, but every child, student, young adult has special needs, and sometimes we're more intentional about these. I think about my older son, and he had a different set of issues, but in Nadege's, some of their experiences and Mendel's experiences resonate with some of the things that we have experienced as well. And hopefully our presentations and the questions afterward will help us all kind of take one step at a time and figure it out. Kurt completed the Georgia Tech Excel program, and he was in the first cohort, began in 2015 and ended just this past spring. He is an Atlanta native. I understand that there aren't a whole lot of those around. Charlie and I have one other son, Andrew, an older brother. We learned at about 6 weeks that Kurt would have some challenges, and he was diagnosed with a congenital neurological condition, which wasn't anticipated to worsen, but he presented with ultimately with right-sided weakness, delayed milestones, some processing delays, and then later, like Mendel, a seizure disorder. So we learned of this much earlier than Mendel. He began PT, OT, and ultimately speech therapy all before he was a year old. And he brought to it a persistent and determined temperament, which is most of the time a really good thing, particularly if you can sort of help it not getting stuck occasionally, or maybe it's the parent that gets stuck occasionally. In his early education, we have lived in Decatur all of his life, a suburb of Atlanta, and when he was of preschool age, there was in the local school district, an experiential preschool called Kinderheim, and the picture that you see on the right was him when he was 5 years old as he graduated from Kinderheim, and as you can see, he was thrilled. It was a good, because the school district is small, we benefited from having individual attention really throughout his educational career, but the school system was large enough so that there were choices, but small enough so that we didn't really get mired in hierarchy and, well, we can't do this because we can't do it for everybody. So that was really a real blessing throughout his career. Indeed, we, like all of us who have been in this path, had IEPs, and we learned early on that indeed it was teamwork, that we knew more about our child than anybody else, but that the teachers and faculty, be it elementary or on up through college, have tools in their toolbox, expertise that really helped Kurt grow and blossom. That sometimes required all of us to stretch and think outside the box. I remember when he was in elementary school that Spanish as a second language was begun in kindergarten, and he was just mastering English as a first language, and that was a bit of a challenge to work together to make an exception that really fit him the best. But IEPs, as being individualized education plans, indeed have helped him all along the way. In middle school and high school, we tried to be intentional about keeping doors open until they were closed optimally by him, i.e., if he got to a place where he wasn't able to do whatever seemed to be next, then that was a closing door. We tried not, as in the Spanish example, we tried not to just sort of go with the flow sometimes when things just weren't accomplished because somebody said, well, we don't do it that way. He really, and my background, as Ramatu said, is in pediatrics, and like all children, the value of being known, I believe, helped him to get to his greatest potential, to feel comfortable, because there were times, I'm sure, I'm not in his skin, but I'm sure there were times in our times when he feels different because his right hand doesn't work as well or whatever the case was. But the value of being known by the school system on up through college made a huge, huge difference. And I reiterated that individual education plan because those three words, we say them all together, IEP, they roll off our tongue, but he benefited and from the individual focus, the faculty, regardless of what age he was, working towards helping him achieve educational goals and then planning for whatever came next. In his case, he needed more time. He was able to accomplish a lot of the academics, but he needed more time. So he did kindergarten in Kinderheim, and then he did kindergarten again in the elementary school. When the transition to middle school came around, we all decided that it made sense for him to have another year in 5th grade. So he went to middle school after having done 5th grade twice, and he did an additional year in high school. And I really think that even though sometimes we put, not push on through, but follow the path that for him anyway, sort of stopping and trying to figure out, okay, what is the best, that extra time that he had really, I think, has ultimately made a difference in his abilities to figure out what comes next. So trying to discern the best fit for life after high school was hard. It was hard during that last year in high school. Everybody, well-meaning adults and students too, that question, where are you going to go to college? And his older brother had gone to college. I think at the end of high school, while he had a lot of gifts and strengths that might have served him to go to traditional college, that really didn't seem to any of us that did not resonate as being the right fit. But it really was hard when everybody asks that very well-intentioned question, where are you going to college next year? That we have learned, with the benefit of hindsight, it's kind of like that V8 commercial. Oh gosh, looking back, it makes a lot of sense that transitions have been always difficult for him. And I heard Nadege talking about that with Mendel too, and for us, it was often vacations, one season into another, but certainly this described this last year in high school. We got to what didn't seem the right fit, which was traditional college, and kind of stumbled into learning about Roosevelt Warm Springs through VR, which at the time there really was no VR presence in the special ed department in the high school, and on what would we have done differently would have been knowing about that earlier with much more of a system. But Roosevelt Warm Springs is a residential program for students with disabilities in Warm Springs, Georgia, and it's very individualized. It is very both independence and vocational support related. They utilize a case management model. And I guess if I had one thing to say about what I would hope for every child all the time throughout is that case management, looking at what are this individual's needs and how can we support that really makes the difference in the success. There were some supported internships that he benefited from. He, as you can see in the picture in the bottom, made a friend there that he still keeps up with now, several years later. One of the awesome things that Roosevelt Warm Springs did was that they connected us with an individual business in town by the name of Community Connect. This is a job transition program that Nadege talked about generically, and this is one specific one that we just fell into. They were a contractor for Roosevelt Warm Springs, and they provided him with a job coach and also a MARTA coach, so that we live in town and riding MARTA is important. Kurt will not drive, and getting around and becoming independent is important, but I have to admit that the idea of sending my kid out into MARTA all by himself at one point in time was pretty overwhelming. So he learned how to do that with the support of a coach. And then right about that time, we learned again, very accidentally, a referral through a referral about this new program called Excel at Georgia Tech. Next slide. So we applied, he applied, and he was accepted, and we had no idea what that was going to look like, despite the fact that the folks at Excel were very sharp and had a vision for what the program would be. This was the very first year of the very first cohort. So we certainly knew going in that we didn't know what the challenges might be that we would bump into, but there would likely be some. And that ultimately, and we navigated them well and or not well. But one of the take-home lessons was there are always going to be things that you can't see around the corner, and things that are in new programs or new jobs or new living situations that you can't anticipate. And so that turned out to be a really good life lesson, that when there were bumps, well, this is kind of how the real world works. Indeed, that first year, navigating college and transportation, living arrangements, living with roommates, managing finances. He was able to do the managing finances very well on his own, but there's a big adjustment to all of that. And food, it's hard for me to come home and get dinner ready, or how do you do that when you're trying to go to college and you're navigating a good distance and the time that it takes to put food together, even if you don't have a hand that doesn't help you quite as much. And then, as Nadege said, the social life. Indeed, that was yet another piece that is for every student in college, not just kids in Ideal or at Excel, but is a real challenge. We had the program at Tech uses mentors, and indeed they were fabulous in and of themselves, but they're about the same. In some respects, they're not necessarily older like the faculty, and trying to figure out, okay, what's the role of the mentor, what's the role of the coach, what's the role of a tutor, and yet one more layer of navigating all that new stuff that first year in college. The subsequent years, navigating the balance between being an adult and yet also identifying what additional supports might be needed and stretching beyond what is comfortable. And again, that, with the benefit of hindsight, is a life skill, but it's not so much fun when you're in the middle of it. And certainly there were times that, in hindsight, we're glad we got through, but they were pretty stressful at the time. Charlie and I have been, throughout the career, Kurt's educational career, really appreciative of the commitment and engagement on the part of faculty and staff, students themselves, and the community. The other thing that we as parents from Ideal and Excel benefit from, that we think probably lots of students, typical students, should benefit from, but the value of internships. And indeed, that also expanded Kurt's world to have a safe, sort of a supported job experience where folks were understanding, could help stretch him, but also if he needed additional support, then it was okay to ask for that. And the picture there on the right, he did some work through a traineeship with Georgia Lend and Center for Leadership and Disability, and worked to have the language of one of the, and he can remind me of which number it is, House Bill 57, to take the word retarded out of any legislature that comes, and so he was able to go and see Governor Nathan Deal, sign the legislation into law. And that was really cool to be able to have that opportunity. Then we got to last year, and indeed it's transition yet again. For him, it, I think, was really mitigated by having a job that he had worked as an internship, which became then transitioned into a job. He knew the employer. They at CLD have been amazing, and it really, I think, took away that horrible stress that we experienced that last year in high school of what is in the front, what is next. He himself said, with respect to living arrangements and starting his job, well, he wanted to do one big change at a time. He wanted to go ahead and get started with his job, and then we would navigate the living arrangements. So that self-awareness, Charlie and I were just really proud of, that maturity, becoming understanding of oneself is hopefully what all our kids ultimately do. Next slide. And just briefly, if we have had a lot of successes, we have had some things that didn't go so well. I guess if I had a magic wand, that going back to that case management, that if we bumped into things, and we were very fortunate that we just sort of fell into things, but there's not at least there wasn't when Kurt graduated from high school in 2013, there was not a coordinated system of options that are available for non-traditional post-secondary education. And I think we as a society can do that better, and I hope that we are using things like this webinar to be able to connect with one another more, to push for that and to advocate for our kids. As I mentioned, we had tremendous, really, there were some exceptions, sure, but tremendous commitment and dedication of faculty that across the life spectrum, the education spectrum, really amazing people working with our kids. Excel was a new program, and indeed did a really good job of individualizing the courses. I think that we can always individualize things even better, and my magic wand wishes them a lot of support in continuing to discern what their kids need, what their students need, forgive me, and what is the best way to go about working as a team with the student. And again, as I mentioned, the bumps throughout, whether they were roommate related, whether they were food related, whether they were classroom related, whether they were time management related, I think helped provide some problem solving into what our real world experiences as well. One of the bumps that and Nadege spoke about this too, that I want for us as a society to, and locally, to do more and better with financial aid opportunities. And it seems crazy that students that are in post-secondary education are not, there is now some financial aid, but there's not the Hope Scholarship, and on a legislative level, I hope we're able to change those kinds of things. If wishes were horses, as my mother would say, things that would have really been great to have more of. Ongoingly, high school, not so much elementary school maybe, but high school and even college, more opportunities formal and informal connections with parents. And there were some of those all the way along. Often I found that, you know, parents are networking or brainstorming, and if I bumped into somebody who had a child that was in the same high school class that Kurt was, and some potential exploration that they had done, that, oh, that's interesting, I didn't even know about that. So I really would have liked all the way along to be able to have more formal and informal connections, opportunities to connect with other parents about resources that and experiences that they are having. Sometimes this feels like, you know, are we doing the right thing? This is kind of a lonely experience in some respects, and yet not at all. And it's nice to have that affirmation and also those resources from other parents. Again, I would request that there would have been more intentional information about options that were available after high school in an organized fashion. And hopefully I'm dating myself in that, oh, that's really much better now, but that would have really helped. We benefited, as I said, from just sort of bumping into things, and not because somebody said, okay, here's a menu of the options that are available, here's where your student might fit, and here's what we need to do to make that decision. And we didn't really experience it in that regard. We know our children better than anybody else. And as I mentioned, yet the faculty has tools, the educational tools. So indeed, collaborate, assuming that, and I wanted them to just say, okay, this is the IEP and this is what we're going to do. And, you know, wouldn't it be nice if it was all mapped out? And it's not. So that ongoing collaboration, we found ongoingly, and this is really in our lives as well, that you can't necessarily see around the corners, but that one decision now is all we can do with the best information that we have at the time, and we have to navigate with that, just sit with that anxiety, and hoping and likely that this decision will then inform the next decision, and then learning that happens for us sometimes as a family has then made that anxiety of what am I going to do in the future come back to now, and I can deal with what happens in the now. Identifying goals with your student in all domains, academic, social, vocational, developmental, being realistic, and being very concrete. I think the more concrete that we can be with faculty and with staff that are working with our students is really helpful. And again, I've sort of learned this all through not the School of Hard Knocks, but I got more and more concrete as time went on because that seemed to be working better. And then I think it's important to talk with faculty and leadership as how will the program be able to address these specifics, and then finally to identify and explore what the modifications that the student may need are, and how the program will be able to address those, and how the goals will be achieved if those modifications fall short. If a tutor has to go home in the middle of the semester, how does that work for the academic achievement? So that's our experience kind of in a nutshell. Thank you, Kurt. I forgot to say in the beginning that we talked about it and he gave us permission to tell his story. So I appreciate that, that he gave Charlie and me permission to tell his story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beth, for a very, very thorough and insightful presentation. It is now time for us to answer questions. So if you could drop some questions in the question bar. I noticed one participant had raised his hand, so I'm going to unmute if you so that you can talk. Kenneth Surdin. Yes. I've unmuted you if you want to ask a question. Hi, Kenneth.
No, that was an accident. I have no question. Great presentation. That's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Natalie raised her hand. Well, you could type too if you want to, but let me unmute Natalie. Hello, Natalie. Natalie Whitlow, you want to talk? Okay, maybe it was another accident.
No, it's okay. I'm learning the application. Okay.
Okay, that's good.
My question is about Mendel. Ramatu said something about his having a skill to learn French and having hoped that he would have expanded on that knowledge. My question is, what would you anticipate him doing with that knowledge and skill after his education?
Can you hear me? Thank you for the question.
Yes.
Okay, hi, Natalie. My thought is I've been told that whenever you know another language, it's a whole world that opens up to you. So that alone, to me, if he masters French, for example, since he had some experience living in a country that speaks French for over 7 years. So if he continues with something that he had shown an ability in, that a whole world will open up to him. Either working, for example, they have an Alliance Française here in Atlanta, which is a little school and a language institute where you can go and learn French. This is a place where he could work at, where he could continue. Or you have the whole Western countries in Africa where they speak French there. Again, that's another world that opens up to him, and where he could do anything he wants, any opportunity that present himself to him, he would be able to do it.
Okay, this question, I would pass it on to Beth. It says, what do you feel high schools need to do to best prepare students who want to participate in post-secondary education?
Ramatu, I would say that from my perspective, there are two pieces to that really would be helpful to do more of. One is to know what is out there and available, and then be able to present that in individualized ways to the students who might benefit from that information. We didn't know until we bumped into Excel. We had no idea that there were such things as post-secondary education programs, and we felt so dumb that first year that he was in Excel when there were references of all these places throughout the country, some not too far away geographically. And I thought, well, those might have been good fits. I mean, not that I was regretting it all, but what our choices had been, but it would have really been nice to know that those kinds of things existed, or that Warm Springs existed. And we didn't, despite the fact that our school system was very good and that individual special ed teachers were excellent, that there was not much of a common base of knowledge or presented to us as to the kinds of things that were available. So having a more cohesive and comprehensive knowledge of what is available would be the first. The second is that what I call case management. I'm a nurse, and I define that by looking at what the individual's needs are, and then matching, having hopefully someone or someones who also know what those needs are besides the parents, and then working with the student to get the best fit of supports that they need, programs that they need based on the strengths that, and opportunities, challenges that they bring to the table. So almost having a, not a one-to-one correspondence, but just really, you know, if you have a special ed teacher the first year and the second year and the third year and the fourth year, and then you're in transition the fourth year, it's really hard to make up for that lost ground. So it would be great to be able to have more case management, more connection of students' needs identified, and what kinds of modifications they may need going forward with people who know, and that then can refer back out to what's available.
I would like to piggyback on that question too. As an effort to disseminate information on the available inclusive post-secondary education colleges, I have been attending resource fairs, transition resource fairs, where high school students and their parents and families attend, and we disseminate information on all the available colleges in Georgia. And another way one could find out is through the GIPSEC website. That is the Georgia Inclusive Post-Secondary Education Consortium website. We have a list of all the colleges that currently run inclusive post-secondary education in Georgia, and we also are still in process of adding more colleges onto the list.
That's really great to hear, and I hope, it's really exciting to hear that there are people like you that are reaching out to the folks in the school systems as well, because that we need that. That's great.
Any more questions? We're rounding up now. We have 3 minutes left. So I'll wait another 1 minute. Feel free to ask your questions. We're here for you. So I think I'm going to round it up now. So if you still have questions, you could email me and I could get them answered. If you have specific questions for Beth or Nadege, then we would I would get the questions across to them. So this is going to be the end of our presentation. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Nadege, for very, very informative and insightful presentation. I would like to say, do look out for our email. There will be a very short survey, not up to 3 minutes of your time, to let us know how we did, or if you have any more topics you want covered in this series. Someone just sent in a thank you note. You were all great. Thank you so much. So we're going to have a survey, and I would also send you links to the GAPSEC website, where you could find the recording of this presentation, and also the PowerPoint presentations will be available, the PDF of the PowerPoint presentations. Thank you once again. Nadege and Beth, you could say your byes. You could say something. Beth, what do you
thank you all. Thank you all. It takes a village, and we are it for one another. Thank you.
Nadege, any closing remarks?
Thank you very much. And I really enjoyed learning from Beth's stories and how they're so similar.
Thank you. Yeah, right. I had that thought when you were talking as well.
Exactly. And I failed to mention that also Mendel benefit a lot from many of the internships that he did at Georgia State Ideal program as well. He worked as a media reporter assistant in the Georgia State Library. His experience just changed the child, just completely change the child. So collaborate as best. Thank you so much.
Okay. So just a reminder, we have upcoming webinars. There's in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have the webinar on Now's the Time, Early Planning for Maximum Success After High School. Then after that, that would be on 30th of October by Laura Good Deverox. We would have Independent Living Success Tips. This was a rescheduled webinar due to some logistics. It's going to be on November 13th. And then we're going to have a very good one by Microboards, Microboards and Circles of Support by Ryan Johnson and Deborah Carter. This would be on November 27th. Sign up if you're interested in these webinars, and do visit the GuideSec website for all the previous webinars. They are all accessible. You could listen to the recording, watch the video, and have access to all the PowerPoint presentations. Thank you so much and have a blessed day. I will now end the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.